Maybe if you're watching C-SPAN, you've seen the somewhat diminutive yet robust gentleman from New York City, Gerald Nadler. And I was testifying in front of a House subcommittee on the Constitution in the House Judiciary Committee, and Jerry, in exasperation, said during a hearing on this bill, well, JD, if we do that, if we have to go up or down for every regulation, we won't have the time to do much else. And I responded, Jerry, that's a bad thing? Item number 2, and please don't confuse me with Joe Biden. Again, I'll point out these are not hair plugs, but as you know, our vice president has a bit of a weakness for political plagiarism. And that will not be the case with your speaker this afternoon. Let me freely admit that this following idea comes from my friend who served with me in Congress and is retiring this year from the 3rd Congressional District. For years, John Shadegg has been working to get passed. I'm sorry, I forgot what he named it, but when I introduce this in the Senate, we will call it the Constitutional Citation Act. And it's a wonderfully simple idea. But henceforth, anytime a piece of legislation is introduced in either the House or Senate, the authors of that legislation must point out the specific passage in the Constitution of the United States that gives the legislative branch the authority to legislate in that area in the first place. So the Congressional Responsibility Act, the Constitutional Citation Act, and now we move to a third area of the Constitution, and let me alert you, we transition into a phase of comparison. Article 4, Section 4 of our Constitution reads, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government." Now let me pause there, because given this gap, we'd like to see that R capitalized. But to be truly inclusive, for some curious and adventuresome Democrats who may have joined us today, for conservative independents, maybe an errant libertarian or vegetarian who has joined us here this afternoon, we should point out it's a small r, as in the form of a republic. And you'll recall Benjamin Franklin's wonderful definitional analogies. Dr. Franklin said a democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. A republic is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. And though I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'm pleased with my A rating from the National Rifle Association, in this instance, I don't believe Dr. Franklin was referring to that. I believe he was talking about being armed with an intellect and a knowledge of history and the prerogatives of a citizen in a constitutional republic. After all, it was the same Franklin who offered the admonition that these young ladies heard about in school, and maybe you did too. Remember the story, the doyenne of Philadelphia High Society has her granddaughter in tow. It is that fateful year of 1787. They are in the city of brotherly love. She encounters Dr. Franklin and shouts to him, "Dr. Franklin, what form of government have you given us?" And he replies, "A republic, if you can keep it." That admonition rings in our ears and stirs our hearts some 2 centuries and 2 decades later, because nothing else, to put it bluntly, nothing else is so vital, nothing else is so crucial, nothing else motivates us in such a fashion as we're seeing in this special year of 2010. Well, again, to be fair, let me go back and give you the full citation from Article 4, Section 4. "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government and shall protect each against invasion." With those words, our founders made clear that the sovereignty of our nation and the security of our borders is a federal responsibility. And here, fellow Republicans, the contrast could not be clearer. Because 5 years ago, as I was introducing the Enforcement First Act in the United States House of Representatives, a piece of legislation that, quite frankly, has been mirrored in Senate Bill 1070 here by our own legislature, while I was introducing the Enforcement First Act, my opponent, along with the late Ted Kennedy, was introducing a bill that had a poll-tested name, that was supposed to be something to make it more palatable. The term was comprehensive immigration reform. You and I know it far more accurately by a single word: amnesty. Amnesty is wrong-headed. Our scholars spoke earlier of history. Remember Mark Twain's admonition that history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes? Our last amnesty in 1986, President Reagan made it clear that following that amnesty, laws were going to be enforced. That may have been President Reagan's intent, but subsequent administrations did not follow that. Indeed, I've heard from Border Patrol agents, from longtime veterans, many of the same Border Patrol agents who have endorsed my candidacy for the U.S. Senate. They said they were told, beginning following January 20th, 1989, when they encountered those of whom they had a reasonable suspicion that they perhaps had crossed the border illegally, they were under orders. If those under suspicion shouted the word amnesty, or its Spanish cognate, amnestia, they were to let them go. And indeed, that type of myopia was not exclusive to any one administration or any one political party. Indeed, many conservatives, you may remember the late Robert Bartley, an incredible editorial writer at the Wall Street Journal, I believe it was July 4th, 1998. In the lead editorial he wrote, he said there should be a new 5-word constitutional amendment. There shall be open borders. And some of us lived in this fantasy land, and sadly some still do. Now, I might not be an intellectual giant, but I think we can learn the lessons of history. And the fact is, the morning of September 12th, 2001, we should have moved forthwith to protect our borders north and south and understand that border security is national security. And if there is a lament, a regret, a concern I must share with you, both having served as your United States Congressman and now alongside you as a fellow citizen, it is the failure of our government after 9/11 to deal with this problem. And here, the criticism must be pointed. And it does not belong to one political party nor one political figure. But I must offer you my honest assessment. Whether it is Barack Obama or Janet Napolitano or even John McCain, the problem is this. They view this whole question of the illegal immigration we have dealt with, they view it as a political problem to be managed, instead of seeing it for what it really is: a national security threat, an economic security threat, and an invasion which must be stopped. And as your next United States Senator, I will take action to stop it, because I will reintroduce the Enforcement First Act. And I believe I'll have a lot of company who will say, no amnesty, no way, no how. A couple of other notes, and I'll be happy to take this and transform it from a monologue into a dialogue. Get some of your questions. There are those here supporting Senator McCain who will say, well, wait a minute, you're not being accurate. Senator McCain has changed. We've heard the ads, build the dang fence. He used more colorful language and exasperation in the earlier years about it. In the midst of the presidential campaign, if it's that fence they want, I'll build the such and such fence, but I'm not here to lapse into opprobrium. Simply point out how notions change. There have been some other changes from Senator McCain. You honored me with service in the United States Congress, and my colleagues there honored me with the opportunity to be the first Arizonan in history to serve on the House Ways and Means Committee, the committee with direct jurisdiction over our tax code. And I was honored to have a hand in writing the tax cuts of 2001 and 2003 that reinvigorated our economy during troubling times. And I must share with you my very real regret that the man whom I campaigned for president in 2000, Mr. McCain, went to the floor of the United States Senate on both occasions, not once but twice, not only voted no, but stood in the well of the United States Senate and said these were, quote,